Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Space Cowboy here. Welcome back to the channel with another video for you guys here today, and we got to talk about Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks has been one of the most talked about players throughout minicamp, and deservedly so. We're hearing highlights of him catching a 60-yard touchdown pass. We're hearing about the leadership with him mentoring these younger receivers. And these are the things we wanted to hear when he came from Houston. When we acquired him in the trade, we expected him to come in and be one of these high-level veterans to step in and be a solid number 2 wide receiver. And we're going to get through all that from what we're hearing and what my expectations are at this point in time as we talk about Brandin Cooks. But before we dive into that, as you know, the algorithm tends to be a pain in the neck on YouTube, so if you guys can support the channel by hitting the like button, that'd be greatly appreciated, as well as subscribing if you're new, because over 88% of you guys watching are not subscribed. So if you like what you're seeing, stick around and hit that notification bell. So when it comes to Brandin Cooks, we know what we're kind of getting with the hierarchy in Dallas, right? We know CeeDee Lamb is that dude. He's your number 1 guy. And then really, we don't know what happens after that. Because to me, until Michael Gallup can reassert himself, outside of the ACL injury, and we can say he's back or is somewhat similar to what we saw before the injury, to me, Brandin Cooks is wide receiver number 2, and there's no issue with that. I think that this also helps younger guys down the totem pole. You talk about Jalen Tolbert and how he's been doing well, and he's developing quite nicely. Semi Fehoko is a guy that I would hope turns into something. He's developing too. I just think Brandin Cooks was exactly what the Cowboys needed. And getting back to the whole expectations thing, right? Again, we know what CeeDee Lamb is to the Cowboys at this point in time. And of course, you have to go through the hypotheticals. What happens if Lamb gets hurt, right? Or what happens if Gallup isn't what he once was, right? I think the big thing is you have Brandin Cooks, who has shown that he can be a consistent threat on the offensive side of the ball. And I'm not saying the dude is top 5 in the NFL. He's a solid wide receiver that can help your team through certain instances. And in this case, right, going back to the whole if everyone's healthy, right, the lay of the land is this: CeeDee Lamb as your number 1 guy, Brandin Cooks as your 2 or 3 alongside Gallup. And, you have different dynamics here. You have this beast in a wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. Brandin Cooks takes the top off of a defense that we needed, especially with what we saw last year. And I think if the Cowboys truly want to get to that next step, this is one of the key parts of their offense they need to unlock, is the ability for the deep ball to be there. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. We've seen it several times last year where we've been able to go deep, but it feels like we're not taking a ton of those opportunities. And so what I'm hoping happens this go around is with Brandin Cooks stepping in, we know this guy is a burner. Right? We know that this guy can step in, and wherever he has gone, right? He starts out in New Orleans, consistent 1,000-yard receiver there, really good weapon for Drew Brees. Then I believe he goes to New England, and, he does his thing there, weapon for Tom Brady. Then he goes to the Rams. He has his fair share with, Jared Goff and company. And then you go to a team like the Texans, and now you're here in Dallas. I think the key thing in all of this is Brandin Cooks has been a consistent threat at the wide receiver position everywhere he goes. He hasn't been a dominant player, right? But he's been consistent enough to where I think if you plug him into the correct offense, he really can be a nice option. And that's the thing, right, is Brandin Cooks also is experienced. He's been on teams that have gone deep into the postseason. You talk about the Patriots, you talk about the Rams. That's important, right? We're talking about, experience in the postseason, especially with what happened last year, right? The Cowboys, realistically, in my opinion, are one of those teams where if they really had other options, they wouldn't have gone home. And that's just how I truly feel. You can disagree with me all you want, and I think that this is what's key about Brandin Cooks coming in here. I think if you had a secondary pass catcher like a Brandin Cooks, we're having a different conversation. And, maybe that's just wishful thinking. I don't know. But, I would be hard-pressed to think if Brandin Cooks was on the Cowboys last year, that this team would have had a different outlook on how things are going. And I think that's also a testament to where, I'm just being honest with you, we just need situational football to really come into play. Also not being consistently, repetitive with the route trees, and I think that's where Brandin Cooks is going to do nicely, because if you've seen historically how Mike McCarthy has operated his offenses, you get the sense that, he's, worked with guys like Randall Cobb, for example, shorter dudes, and, Brandin Cooks is not a traditional weapon that the Cowboys would get, right? We're talking about, like, guys that are 6'2" or higher, or, 6 foot or higher. Brandin Cooks doesn't fit that mold, and I think one of the things that really made the Cowboys offense jump in 2021, and, you didn't have as many issues with turnovers and stuff like that, is you had veterans, you had a trio of wide receivers that can really take care of the job that needs to be taken care of. You have Lamb, Cooper, and Gallup, and now for the next 2 years, you have Lamb, Cooks, and Gallup. And I think that that's where we kind of look at where the Cowboys are positioned. I think that for Brandin Cooks, being here for at least 2 seasons, it doesn't put pressure on guys like Tolbert, Fehoko, whoever you want to throw in there, to come in and be like, all right, guys, you know what? We need to see you do your thing. If not, you're going. Because that's what happened last year. It really felt like if Lamb went down, you were fucked. That's to just put it bluntly, that's how it felt. And I think that, what is really bugging me in this whole offensive equation, and I want to keep talking about Cooks, because Cooks is really, if you know me, I've been a fan of Brandin Cooks. I made a big thing to talk about getting Brandin Cooks to Dallas last year. And, there were the rumblings not that he wanted, but the Cowboys wanted to bring him here last year during the season, but Houston didn't want to take a certain amount of the cap, and they were asking for too much, so you wait, and you get a nice return on investment there. But I think now the flip side of things, right, is, there are people saying, like, okay, he's getting older, or he's injury prone, right? Here's my thing, and I want to make this super clear. Brandin Cooks is not coming in here to be the number one dude. I think that's where a lot of people that are a detractor of Brandin Cooks, or like looking at how this offense is shaping up, Brandin Cooks is not to be the number one dude. He is coming in here to be a reliable option outside of CeeDee Lamb, and if Michael Gallup returns to form, Michael Gallup as well. Also, it's insurance for if Michael Gallup doesn't turn out to be who he, should be, and he doesn't recover from that ACL injury, it's going to be tough to now think about what happens next, right? Usually, you would think that the Cowboys wouldn't have a contingency plan in place, but it looks like Cooks being here for 2 years gives the Cowboys flexibility. And look, Lamb needs to get his contract, and we'll, cross that bridge when we get there. But I'm really excited to see what Brandin Cooks can do actually on the football field. I think that he's going to help Dak Prescott out a lot. And, if you look at the numbers, Dak has had one of the highest deep ball, not deep ball rates, but like in terms of being able to throw the deep ball and being one of the better passers at doing that. His statistics show that he's good at throwing the deep ball. I think that what bugs me the most and what really kind of puts this offense into a grind is that you don't do anything there. So I think that if you can take advantage, because you kind of saw plays where, the 1/3 and 30, where, Dak just throws as deep as he can go, and you have a guy like T.Y. Hilton who has some speed. I think that's like a glimpse of what you can see with a Brandin Cooks, right? So I don't really have much more to say other than I'm excited. There's reason to believe that Brandin Cooks is going to be something here. Just tell me what you guys think down below. Do you think that Brandin Cooks is going to be good? Do you think, what are your expectations? I want to hear that down below. So please leave that down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. All right, guys, have a good one. Goodbye.